機会をいただきました。英語で喋んなきゃいけませんね。I, as visiting professor of this program, have had the opportunity to teach 3-day special seminar on strategic project and program management. Last year, we hosted that seminar in July, and we are having Mr. Kato, Yuzuru Kato, as one of the participants who successfully completed the course. So it is my great honor to present the diploma of Keio University, as well as Japanese PM Association called PMJ. Kato-san, please come over here. ここへちょっと立ってください。Keio University Graduate School of Business Administration, as well as Project Management Association of Japan, are pleased to announce that Mr. Yuzuru Kato, master student of engineering at Keio University, have successfully completed the grand design project and program management for the grand design seminar. So we are presenting 2 diplomas, one by Keio University, as well as one global certificate by Project Management Association Japan. That's credential of international P2M practitioner. So,はい、おめでとうございます。はい、どうも。どうも先生、ありがとう。
This year in July, we will host the Professor Tanaka's 3-day intensive seminar on project and program management for the grand design. And that is scheduled July 5th and 6th and 12th. And 3-day seminar, and mostly they are in English, but we accept all participants. So this is an announcement, and we will make a formal announcement sometime later in our homepage. And okay. So we are a little bit late our schedule, but we will start a formal session, and it's better to make it. Is this all right? And today we have the seminar. Today we have the seminar on the Japan, India, and China relationship. Mostly we will talk about the perspective from India today. The last time we have the Chinese culture seminar last month. This month we will focus on the India issues. The title is International Relations, Foreign Policy and Business of India. And today we have the several sessions. First, in the morning, we invite Dr. Vikash Ranjan, and he will talk about the strengths and weakness of India and Japan. And we will talk about complementary relationship. And the afternoon, we invite two professors, Swaran Singh and Professor Swaran Singh. He is sitting in front. And another professor is Professor Naidu. And both of them talk about China, India, and Japan relationship. And third session is on business between India and Japan. And three speakers will talk about each issue. And altogether, we cover foreign policy, international relationship, and business and economy itself. And this is a program of today. And is that all right? The first session, we invite Dr. Vikash Ranjan. And could you come up?
Minasan, ohayo gozaimasu. Indo no Vikash desu. Indo no Vikash desu. Kyo watashi wa strength and weakness of Indo to Nihon no tame ni hanashemasu. Demo kyo futari Indo no mo sensei ga imasu kara, futari mo Indo to Chugoku no tame ni hanashemasu. Kara watashi wa どんなものみんな言います。これが今日言わない。どんなものみんな言わないぐらい。これが私は今日3回目ここに発表していますから、私は前にインドと中国の関係のために前に発表したことがありますから、今日大体リージナルダイナミクス、リージナルチェンジズのために話しています。でも今日の発表も英語です。私の日本語がとても下手ですから。多分と、Good morning, everybody. This is Vikash from India. Today I will be speaking about regional dynamics, and there I will try to locate strength and weakness of India and Japan. Since I have already spoken thrice over here on different issues of India and Japan, complementarities and other things in bilateral context, today I will be speaking mostly about regional dynamics, which will be affecting the relationship between the two. Since there are two more professors who would be speaking upon India and Japan relationships in the context of China, so I will be mostly keeping the bilateral issues today. But in a nutshell, what would be this strength and weakness of India and Japan? We can talk about, like, as I had already presented before, that in Japan's finance and high technological prowess gives a complementary relationship to India's cheap labor market and market labor, and proximity to the energy resources, because both of us usually import, most of our energy resources come from the Middle East, and since energy resources from Japan even passes through the Indian Ocean itself, so if there is some manufacturing activity in India, it will save the costs, and it can spur Indian business interest in Japanese business interest in India, which can lead to employment generation and solve other sort of complementarities related with that in India. But today, with the assertiveness of China, and like last time when I talked about military issues about China's assertiveness, I talked about how India and Japan should go about like cooperating in maritime and naval security issues and others like space security or cyber security, those sort of things. But today, with the coming of this ADIZ, this air defense zone, which China has unilaterally announced. So this has made this region a bit relationship between the two in Japan and China recently very tense, because Japan has been like China is increasing assertiveness in the East China Sea, and South China Sea has concerned Japan. So that's why, and recently, but there was a good news that the US has told that in case of any eventualities, they will be supporting Japan on the basis of this 1960 Indo-US, this US-Japan treaty. So that's a good news, but I have been discussing in my other personal fronts that to me, when the South China Sea issue had started, that time itself I had thought that East China Sea would be a major problem area, for at least this is my opinion, because to me, East China Sea is a major threat or is a flashing point than South China Sea or the Malacca Strait as people usually think. Because in my view, if there is an escalation of tension in East China Sea, it serves China's interest 100%. How? First of all, if there is a conflict in East China Sea between, suppose I'm just giving the scenario, that if there is a contest between Japan and China, then it serves Chinese interests in the sense that, first of all, China as a rising power, they want to demonstrate to the world that they have come out of age. Like they are not still rising, they are a power, global power now. For them, since Japan had been the traditional power over here, so defeating Japan would seal their prestige for a time. Second, they're going assert this on historical issues of 1937 and others, which have been claiming in their home countries, okay, this which has been continuing since that time, though that that serves their, they can claim to their domestic audience, okay, by defeating Japan or by fighting with Japan, they have avenged their the historical thing, so that at least the government can continue in power. Third thing, but that would not lead to South China, and here I come to that I don't think there would be a major conflict in South China Sea, rather than the conflict is more this in East China Sea, because then they can go on compromising on to give some concession on South China Sea issues to these ASEAN countries, because they are anyhow very small. So, and even if they compromise with all the countries, 80% of the South China Sea still remains with China. because all other countries claim, 6, 7 countries claim, does not amount to more than 20% of the complete area. So that's why if they can claim, then they can show to the world, okay, we are benevolent even we compromise with the smaller countries for their sake. So that's why I think East China Sea, whenever it started, and ADIZ and other things, so I think that's a more flashing point in the region, in the military context. But obviously that's not going to happen because obviously because China even realizes that they are too much, because taking up any fight in the region may be like whatever may polarize the whole world in that case, because it will be like, as Philippines president said, like China will be like doing exactly the same thing as Germany had been doing in the Second World War, and like if you go on placetting it, then it will not lead to anywhere. So those sort of things may continue. So that's why I don't think there is going to be any fight in the long run. But obviously, assertiveness by China would continue in one way or the other. But in the short term, at least, I think they would be more restrained, because since they are seeing the whole world is almost like having issue, like uniting a consensus that China has gone too beyond, because they have almost taken a fight with most of the countries, including India, on boundary and other issues. Even their support for this Pakistan's economic corridor passing through POK and other regions is not in India's interest, though they have supported. They have said to India that, okay, it's not against India, the bilateral issue is beyond India, Japan, beyond for only India and Pakistan to solve. It's not, China would not get itself involved in that issue. So, and even, but they're again talking about this maritime Silk Route, trade Silk Route. That even shows that China is like trying to, like earlier we were talking about sting of pearls strategy and other things. That is, there is a concern in some quarters in China that they have gone beyond a point in their assertiveness, and they need to assure the world that, okay, they are not that not that assertive in that negative sense. So that's why they are talking about that. Though they have not specified what sort of Silk Route, this maritime Silk Route would be. But obviously, by general guesses, people are thinking about the connectivity and other things, issues will be solved. But again, their recent maritime exercises in the Lombok Strait, bypassing this Malacca Strait, shows that they can open another route to this Malacca Strait, to this region, to enter the Indian Ocean region, which will be mostly becoming prominent in the coming days. And they're including like this exercises in this amphibious aircraft event. So that shows that they have the technologies to take on any other development, development detrimental to China's interest in the region for their own sake, by opening other routes and other things. That may be symbolic even, but that was a clear signal to the world. Apart from that, the other things which are developing, maybe I have talked more about the military thing. The other economic thing, which are the regional issues which have been developing in the region, that this region has been talking about at least two major trade relationships, like Trans-Pacific Partnership and Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And the concern in the region is which of the two will become be more important in the long run, because TPP comprising of 12 countries, including US and other countries, Japan is even a member, so which consists of 38% of world GDP and 25% of world trade. So whatever would be, but TPP wants to have like very exclusive group in the sense that they want to maintain very high standards and which they want everybody to follow. So that may not be suiting to everybody's needs. And mostly people talk about, okay, TPP maybe for to keep China out, though US says that if China wants to come, they should follow the same rules as others are following. Then the other thing which will be developing, which is another partnership which is in the region, is regional comprehensive economic partnership that ASEAN plus 6 countries are talking, where Japan again is a member, which consists of 45% of population and 1/3 of the world's GDP. How these regional trading groups affect the regional world? These regional trading networks affect the World Trade Organization negotiations, because in the sense that if some countries or others have talked about are in one group, they would be mostly like try to implement those issues in the WTO, and that sort of things the people are concerned about. And there maybe with higher standards in TPP and others, maybe labor and other issues, environment issues would be maybe of detrimental to developing countries' interest in RCEP. So that sort of problems may arise. So therefore, it will be very difficult. But at least in the short term, there is not going to be any WTO sort of final commitment on WTO, because the world is divided. So it's mostly the regional trading groups which will rule the trading world. And apart from these, another things. So therefore, in this context, we can see that this Indian Ocean region and Indian Ocean region will be becoming another area for context, in the sense that Indian Ocean region comprises like most of the developing countries, where most of the trade of the world, like more than 55% of the world trade passes through the Indian region. So it will be a contested zone in the coming days. The shift. So therefore, Indian Ocean region would, how to project the Indian Ocean region, like people talk about this Indo-Pacific and other concepts like APEC, Asia-Pacific. So these sort of contested identities have come into account that whichever method some countries promote the Indo-Pacific concept. So those sort of issues have come. One regional organization, even Indian Ocean region, for Association for Regional Cooperation, have come into vogue, comprising the people from 3 different continents. Though hugely, there is a huge difference in their development standards and others. So there is a problem with like whether the IORC would be a regional organization, a viable regional organization in the long run or not. But obviously, since Indian Ocean identity, based on Indian Ocean identity, at least 2 countries, India and Indonesia, can claim their names from the. So that's why I think Indian Ocean region is at least will be important, at least for these 2 countries, because they are located on the major trade networks, because strategically located these 2 countries. So that's why Indian Ocean region would become a major important area. And that's why in this context, I think if you talk about this maritime linkages between India and ASEAN and India and Japan, so that's very low at present, because if you see the shipping capabilities and defense capabilities of Japan is very high, but these 2 things are very much lacking in India. With the growth of this India-ASEAN trade, and even the ASEAN plus 3 and other ASEAN forum like ASEAN Plus One and East Asia Summit, if they are going to grow, the trade between these regions is going to grow, there would be increasing needs for ships to ships and good ports to move goods from one place to the other, at least in the India and ASEAN region. Because if you see most of the ships which have been carrying goods in the region, it's mostly the foreign owners. It's not Indian flagged ships. And it's there are the issues for that because Indian coasts are not very much they have not been properly made in the sense that the dredging is not deep, that draft that it can hold huge drafts. So because of that, most of the goods which India import, it's mostly from the foreign carriers which they had to transship at Singapore or Malaysia and then come back to India. And moreover, since there are mostly this infrastructure constraints in India, so most of the people, even though they have the means, they can develop ports or shipping. So since there is bottlenecks about the infrastructure, so they are not very much interested in moving their goods by ships in the region. But with the opening of Myanmar, these things may change because Bay of Bengal region, because comparatively, if you see India, West Coast and East Coast, then the development on the West Coast is much less than the development on the East Coast because India's traditional trade would have was with the western side, like Red Sea and Persian Gulf. So mostly these some ports on the western coasts are much more developed, like Kandla, Bombay, and others. But on the eastern coast, there are hardly any major ports, though there are some like Calcutta, Haldia, but they are not much big enough or good enough to hold high drafts. So that is a major constraint. Moreover, since we are talking about this connecting Northeast with Myanmar and ASEAN, there are various projects, connectivity projects over there, but till we have not, because it's very difficult to connect all these land areas, in the sense that even if we can connect all the land areas as some projects are there, but it will be difficult to move goods in these land areas because tariffs and trade barriers of different countries would come to into vogue. Then it will be difficult to move perishable goods, at least in these areas, because they will take time in being move from one country to the other. So that though infrastructure may come into place, but still there would be difficulty in movement of goods. These all sort of things can be solved by if we develop these maritime linkages in the Bay of Bengal region. Then to some extent it can be solved. Moreover, since most of the oil trade from this Middle East to China would even be to some extent would be transshipped from this from Malacca, not Malacca, from Myanmar. So because they have already built this pipeline, oil and gas pipeline, their gases started, oil will be starting soon. So that's why I think most of the changes would be mostly coming in this Bay of Bengal region in the maritime shipping sector. And therefore, when there is a development in shipping ships and other things in this region, Bay of Bengal region, then there would be maybe some problem of piracy and other things, disasters and other things. There would be more need for these sort of issues even in Bay of Bengal region. So that's why mostly, and since not only India, even ASEAN and other countries, most except Singapore and Malaysia, not many other countries, ports and other things are much developed in ASEAN even. So that's why there is a much need for development of ports and maritime issues in this region, because then they will be free from not only Malacca, but mostly from whatever, like these transport bottlenecks. Because if these transport bottlenecks are being removed, then obviously the trade and other figures can grow in the long run. So these sort of issues, and then till now, if you see the trade of India, it's mostly in parts and components which are growing with the other region. So if these infrastructure bottlenecks are removed, the trade in parts and components can develop in this region. So based on this, I think the strength and weakness of India and Japan, we can explore some opportunities in shipping sector, and the shipping sector is not particularly shipping as ship building, and that's only one area, but maybe even this port developments. And since India has mostly these dry bulk carriers or the oil and product carriers, so maybe containers and other sort of things can be looked upon, because most of the trades are are done by this container shipping has become a major vogue in the whole world. So, and since to control container shipping, it needs to control the whole supply chain, because just having ship does not lead to your movement of goods. So that's why I think there is a whole range of business opportunities which can be explored in the maritime sector in the Indian Ocean region. That would even to some extent more would contain or reduce the influence of China, which it has been growing through different means, like through its next engagement with Pakistan, as I talked earlier, or with Myanmar, or even this maritime silk trade routes and others, which it has been talking about. So. And apart from this maritime shipping, there is one more. This India needs to develop, since India has been mostly importing defense equipments. So India needs to build its own manufacturing bases in India for defense products. And since mostly we have been importing, and because since Japan itself had export ban on the defense equipment still now, higher defense technologies, which they have agreed to remove now, at least in the context of India. So we can explore development of different defense equipments, different defense related industries in India, which would be of much interest to India, in the sense that would not reduce India's dependence upon huge export. It will save lots of foreign exchange even, and generate employment in the region even. And that to some extent will be in India, Japan's interest even, because as they have been trying to forging a partnership with India in the various sectors, as have happened till since 2009 particularly onwards. So that would make it more that would make the bilateral partnership more stronger. And recently India has announced that they would build 50,000 troops, which will be based only in northeast on the China border. So obviously that shows some sort of concern that India may, because China has already developed the infrastructure in the border regions, which are very good in that sense. So that's why I think India would mostly try to make out even out those whatever developments China have made by developing in the like building technologies, which would be of which can curtail to some extent if there is some problem with China in the long run, then it can contain. Though I don't think there is going to be any fight with China or those sort of things, but still, nobody knows in this world that when something can flare up, but still, we people need to build capabilities and capacities. So in that context, at least these defense-related industries with Japan even can be explored. Thank you so much. Any question?
So we have the Q&A session and discussion. So who is there? Could you raise hands?
You mentioned the manufacturing capability. My question is really about the population or in the future. You may know China will have the maximum population around the 2030. Still, the India is growing up the populations. And in that situation, how about educational levels to, the educate or instruct for making a manufacturing, forces?
Thank you, sir, for the question. Actually, the population is not a problem, I think, because if you were talking about the market, we should talk about how much market is there. Because China may have a bigger population, that does not mean that China has a bigger market. Because that's why if China was an export-oriented country still now, and India mostly is like mostly manufacturing is like domestic consumption. So that's why you have to make a difference. Even in the if you go by numbers, even the numbers, okay, India's number is not very high compared just after China. We have 1.3 for China and 1.2 for India. So that's not very much difference in numbers even. And even if you go by 2015 or so, China's population is going to decline from them. That's why recently they have started this two-child policy, because they know that in the long run they are going to have some problems. So and India's population would take on like China's population by 2030 or so. So that's why even population is not an issue even then, because I think it's mostly the during investment people look at whether you have the adequate market and you have the skills for the manufacturing activity or not. So I think Indian, at least if you talk about general education in India, maybe by government standard 26%, 30% may be illiterate, but by normal standard, even if you have put 50% outside in the illiterate category. But the 10 or 20% who are literate in India, that's a very, very huge number to man any of the industries. And those 10 or 20% of India who are literate, they are literate by world standards. So that's why you see most of the Indians making their names in the higher technology sector, IT and other things, rather than the biotechnology and these sort of sectors. So I don't think even in manufacturing and other things there would be like problems in the long run for any industries in India. And even for the marketing base, I think since if you see the consumption rates or the per capita income, which is growing very fast. So that's why once I was talking earlier, even people talking about, oh, India is such a poor country, how you can invest. I told that, okay, maybe if you talk about India as a whole, it's a poor country and maybe a developing country, not much marketing opportunity. But if you see it in the other way around, if suppose I say that only 10% of India has purchasing capability of for whatever products you are building, I say that if 10% of India is like equivalent to Japan's population, or if it's 15%, it's 1.5 times of Japan's population. Then you have the markets over there, much higher markets in India than in Japan. So that's why I think India has both the market, this marketing capabilities as well as the population for any manufacturing activity to grow adequately. Thank you.
Professor. Probably my view is biased, very personal, but Indians and Chinese are not getting along quite well because you have different paradigm, value system, idiosyncrasy. In the meanwhile, India depended, as I understand, heavily on former Soviet Union, now Russia, in terms of science, technology, education. And actually you mentioned some defense technology. I'm quite familiar with BrahMos missile company. That is joint venture between India and Russia. That's doing so good jobs, right? What is the future of India-Russia relationship? I'm asking that question because I'm teaching in Russia. I am very close to India in terms of project management.
Okay, sir. Actually, India-Russia relationship is very good in the sense that has been Russia has been a traditional friend of India, and even before US had you been seeing that Russia had been the largest defense exporter to India, and we have been making all the technologies and other things. But in the present context, Russia is not a global power in that sense. They have grown down. Their own defense industry has grown down, not developed in that sense. So now you see mostly like a shifting of India's defense export from Russia to US and other countries. So that's still I will not deny that Russia had been a traditional and critical friend in that sense. But since they're mostly dependent upon one or two products like oil and one more textile or something like that, so only one or two basic products for primary goods for the exports and other things, so there is not much scope for cooperation. And even beyond, if you leave all these things, so if you see, to some extent, though there are some sort of cooperation between India and Russia in the technological defense equipment, but in military exercises terms, it's very, very low. It's mostly with the US and other things. It's hardly there. So that's why I think how to put India-US relationship in US context, it's in the present context, it's difficult in the, not difficult in the sense that it has its own own speed and own, it has its own, own dynamics. So that should be seen as a complete on its in its whatever dynamics it holds, because it should not be seen in the broader context of India, US, or India, Russia, those sort of things, because Russia is not a game changer in that sense of the term now. Thank you, sir.
United States Department of Defense.
Okay.
So basically the U.S. is targeting now in Asian countries, the India and Vietnam to approach for us. Particularly in these 3 years, we are putting a relatively large investment to India for stimulating the typically the R&D, research and development. So we started collaborative military, the training, and we are doing rather well. And Vietnam is another, our target. And unfortunately, a couple of years with Japan, we had some conflicts. However, after the new, government came in, we are moving much forward aggressively. So Japan, India, particularly, we are really enforced by the admiral from Navy for provide a research fund to Japan and India, particularly last year. That's the current situation. So India, US are really approaching very closely now, okay?
I think so. You are right in that sense, because I even know that Vietnam and others, since they need huge defense, at least naval equipment. So for that, for the first time after so many years, Vietnamese president was had visited the U.S. and they met with President Obama and other things, and that's why. And it may not be from the, as you presented it, like US is assisting, but maybe it's even in the sense that the whole global economy is going down and they need some sort of investment opportunities. So where to go, and India is that provides a place of opportunities in that sense, that they have the market to. So that's why maybe even that cooperation is continuing, and maybe obviously China presents another point for their cooperation, because people don't know how China will behave in the long run. So they are still concerned. So that's why they are going on building capabilities and capacities.
Excuse me. Thank you for your presentation. Nice talk. Excuse me, my question is not about foreign relations, but about your situation in Japan. I know that there are more and more Indian people, scientists and business persons in Japan now. How their children are educated here in Japan, or rather in your own country? I'm interested in this point. I'm so sorry.
That's a very difficult question to answer. I don't know what people will think, but obviously if you are talking about the global dynamics, at this point even I had raised earlier, because I think if Japanese businesses have to go global, they need to learn English. And if they are the Indians who, at least in Japan, so they will not like their children to, they will like their children to learn Japanese, but they will like them to speak in English in the foreign countries, so that they can become a better leader in that sense. Which is true both for either as a native Japanese or the Indian born Japanese. So at least additional languages is good, but still English cannot be ignored in the present context. Otherwise, how you can go and talk to other people? That's will become difficult.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, your question would be answered, because the person who is going to ask question, he is the son of a Japanese parents,
Right.
Who is an Indian or born of Japanese parents. So that's why you
I just thank you for your presentation, Mr. Ranjan, and I just want to know your point of view or your opinion that where Indian politics is seeing right now, or to forecast in the future, because China is investing a lot in Pakistan and in Myanmar and any other Asian countries, and also like Bangladesh accepted the foreign investment from all over the world, and like for example Uniqlo, opened their plant in with Torre, and started selling their product, and also, but to me, it's Indian politics is pretty much isolated from Asian, political countries, and even the Emperor of Japan visited India at the end of the last year, and the beginning of the year, Mr. Abe visited India to accept the another ODA to invest in infrastructure, right? But there's so many, the regulation or restriction for the foreign investment from Japan to India, especially retail market and pretty much. So what is the Indian politicians or politics is seeing for the future? They want to get along with the US or UK or the EU, not Japan? That is my question.
No, I think it's Indian politics not about looking at any particular country in that context, because Indian politics, I know its present is very unstable. Mostly the situation till now is very complicated. Nobody can predict, though people are saying about BJP, but still it's not, it's too early to say anything for any political party. Maybe there would be a hung assembly. But whatever the domestic situation, that does not affect the international relations, at least in Indian context, because and Japan has a very, very fair image in India. If you're talking about retails and others, the retails and others are not being stopped only for Japanese or some other country. Understand, retail as an issue has been stopped, because people are talking about that if you start give opportunities in the retail sector to everybody, the traditional livelihood of many people would be affected. And what about its backward and forward linkages and other things? Though there are people talking about both sides of pro and cons of if retail comes, people can get better dividends, better margins and other things. But still people are talking about traditional people will lose their jobs and other things. So that's why I think political issues in India are a bit complicated. And it's not related with this international issue that whether the US or UK or Japan, it does not matter over there in that case. And these are completely different issues in that context, I think so. So that's why, and anyhow, we have good relations with Japan, because maybe if you might be knowing, but in 2007, there were only 100 Japanese companies in India. In today, 2013, it's more than 1,800. Imagine 1,700% jump in just 7 years, 6 to 7 years. So there is some sort of changes. As you yourself talked about the visit of King and the visit of Prime Minister Abe, who was our chief guest in the Republic Day. So that people in Japan know the significance of visit of King themselves, that how at least Japan, how closely Japan views India. So in that context, I think it's not about emphasis upon which country would be more closer. I think Japan has a fair image. Japan has complementarity with India in every sector, in each, whatever, be it economic, military, regional, whatever I talk about. And since Japan does not have any historical baggage within, at least in our relationship, so we are free from all these things. So that's why I think India-Japan relationship is one relationship which can be proactively promoted, which benefits both the countries. And any government in India will not matter in that context. Particularly, it will not matter. Obviously, I can understand the procedure, bureaucratic procedure delays, but that would be very generalized for all the countries in India. As a country, specific in Japan would not be affected in that case. Thank you.
I have one question about the security issue. You said there's a possibility that East China Sea will be the flashpoint in the US-China power game or Japan-China power game. But I think the South China Sea will be the more dangerous than the East China Sea because there are no responsible strong power in this area. This means that this region is one kind of power vacuum. And the China's strategy looks like water. Water flows from the high to low. Water cannot destroy the hard one, but penetrate. So that if there is a power vacuum in this area, China will flow at the worst case scenario. Could you give me some comment about this?
I think, Satosan, I personally don't think so, because I gave the complete reasons that why China can, it's in China's interest to have like a fight with Japan rather than with South China Sea, because South China Sea is still, as you yourself said, they comprise of countries, very, very small countries, which if the China has to, after like if they have a fight with Japan and they can establish themselves as a power in the region, and after that if they can compromise with these smaller countries, they can show their benevolent side to the world. Okay, we are not that bad in that sense, that okay, we are good with the other smaller powers in that case, because they will try to have some of their they will try to manage their image even in that case. So that's why I think East China Sea is more problematic than the South China Sea in that context. And because I already gave the region 3-4 regions, that because what China gains by it, all the historical things, whatever it is talking about, it can sell it to the domestic audience. It establishes itself as a dominant power in the region, and without losing anything. China does not have to lose in this game, and even in South China Sea, by compromising it, it is not losing anything, because anyhow 80% of South China Sea is in China's hand.
There are some issues which are not directly related to India's interest, but nevertheless, India is expected to comment, such as the dispute between China and Japan on historical issues, or the dispute between South Korea and Japan on the so-called comfort women issue, or the dispute over Dalai Lama when Dalai Lama was meeting the US president. On such issues which India is not very directly related, then what is India's position on those issues? I mean, if you ask the Indian, it may be diplomatic custom not to mention such issues between third parties. Nevertheless, India is expected by China, Japan, the US, and many other countries to express directly or indirectly its own position. So in such delicate situations, how does the Indian government calculate its position or the degree to express its position? This is the first question. And how do the Indian public in general think about those issues?
Thank you, sir. Actually, this comfort to women issues and China-Japan issues are a bit complicated issue in the sense that I think here it's a fault of Japan in that sense. Though they have done enough for this comfort women and other issues like India, China, Japan, China, like Nanjing massacre and they have done a lot. They have never publicized it. So most of the people, they don't know. Understand? Though even I was going through some data, like so many billions of aid and other things have been given, and that too World War II situation was 50 years earlier, which only very recently one Japanese ambassador to UK wrote about, that it was 50 years earlier, and now still you are talking about that, when in Europe itself people have forgotten it. They have forgotten each other and they can go well. But why don't you this region? You have let China, you have given China an opportunity to use that an excuse. And since most of the people don't know what you have done, whatever you have done, they're giving aid and other things, it has been in silence. Then how people know, and what people should you expect people to do in India? So obviously, most of the Indian government and other things, I think people don't know what Japan has done. So that should be, I think, more publicized in that sense. And I think Indian government, at least in that case, they do not care about what was the historical issues. Mostly public may not, public mostly, people don't know what had happened. Though people have very fair image about Japan, but they don't know, at least on these issues, about what Japan has done or what after that what Japan did for them. So at least these should be publicized in that case. So it's more, rather than India, it should be, Japanese should be more vocal about saying that, okay, we have done all these things, and why you are raising it after 50 years. So those sort of things, which I was happy to see that ambassador's article after such a long time. I think that was the first article which had come after Second World War, denying all the things. So that should have been done.
Thank you. I don't have any question to you, but I have one comments for you, Professor. For the publicity is concerned, I'm pretty sure that you visit India many times. Whenever I visit India, I'm in Japan last 15 years. So whenever I visit India, I do one thing. I visit the big electronic shop, and I will check Japan. I will check Japan where it is. So when I check Japan, we have to keep in mind that Japan is a producer, is a producing country. They produce, they innovate something. So whenever we visit electronic shop, the electronic shop person will introduce Korean product, not Sony or not Hitachi. When you arrive in Delhi airport, toilet, you will see Korean product, not the Japanese product. So Koreans know how to how to do a publicity for their product right from the toilet, right from the day people or the world arrive on the airport. Because when you want to buy a television which is more than $2,000 and which can afford only high-class people in India, and normally these people travel all around the world. So when they see a huge number of such type of product in the airport, they have a mentality or they have an image, wow, this product is so good. So ultimately when they arrived in the electronic shop, they will buy the Korean product. So this is something like a publicity. Most of the Japanese people feel that, okay, Japanese king visit India. But when he visit India first time in, I think, 1956, if my memory is not wrong, he visit as a honeymoon. And India is not a country to visit honeymoon in 1956, if I'm not wrong. But beyond that, but back to that story, there is something political background. Why Japan's king visit India in 1956? So I always feel that Japan is lacking behind something. They are doing pretty good, but they don't know how to do a publicity. Thank you, sir.
I think your comments were right, but I would like to just clarify one minor thing. You talked about Korean being more products being more, they can more publicize and those sort of things. I think it's mostly related with the pricing issues. Because if you talk about because South Koreans were the one who moved earlier into the Indian markets, and their prices, if you compare with the Japanese products, though they are technologically better than the Korean products, but Korean products, though a bit lower, even the prices are a bit lower. So people go for that product rather than the high technology Japanese product. Because they think the high technology, both of them are similar. Because maybe Japanese 100%, that's 90%. They think, okay, 90% if I get a bit cheaper, it's better. And since Koreans had moved earlier into the Indian markets, they have a vast network that they can market their products, which Japanese does not have. That's why when this nuclear issue was being negotiated, then people in Japan were, at least that time before 2011 tsunami, people were some of the companies were very eager to move earlier than before these South Koreans have the nuclear agreement with India. So that when this in nuclear market, at least they can be earlier than South Koreans. But that did not happen because of other regions. So that's why I think it's mostly about not about the quality of products matter, because if you go by general Indian psyche, they think that Japanese products is good. They want to buy it. But obviously the pricing factor comes. So I think if I can shell out 100 rupees for something and 200 rupees for something, so I'll go for 100 because I know they are similar. Thank you.
Excuse me, sir. Only last comment. Korean people know the. If you see that when. Which changed? Maybe is a long matter we can discuss in person later.
Yeah, definitely. But I think age in that case may not be, but a very, this is like how much long you have been. It may reflect in your own company that how much senior or how much experience a company wants to send it over there. So maybe if a company thinks if I with 5 years experience I'm good enough to lead that company in that country, that's okay. If somebody thinks that only with person with 10 years experience should go because the market is more complicated, that's okay. That doesn't matter about the like marketing of the things.
Thank you, Professor Nagawa. I just want to add to what Vikash said about history issues. I'm going to speak about them in the afternoon when my turn comes. But it's interesting that you raised the issue. Partly because India was also one of the countries which was affected by the Second World War and Japanese occupation. Not the entire country, but parts of it. The advantage you have with India is that we have forgotten that part. I said past is past. Let's move on. So that's not the case, unfortunately, in this part of the world. And even Southeast Asians, to a large extent, don't really raise the historical issues. For whatever reason, especially China and Korea, they keep raising this issue. And if you ask an average Indian who is reasonably aware of East Asia, he thinks that China is trying to take advantage of the history issue. Not really, harping on the past, as though something has to be still to be redeemed. That issue is not the case in India. We had British rule for more than 200 years. Nobody talks about British atrocities, and we have several massacres and exploitation and whatnot. India was one of the leading economies before the British came in the world. India and China together controlled nearly 60% of global GDP. By the time British left, it had less than 10%. So that's the British exploitation. All you need to is look at any economic history books. But we don't harp on what the British did. We forgot about it. Hey, it's time to move on. So that's exactly would be our assessment of the history. Okay, after 70 years, it's 70 years since Second World War ended. Okay, there's no end to it. If you go on talking about history always. Enough has been done, and you have invested a lot in these two countries. You helped these countries enormously. Korea was one of the first countries to get benefit out of Japanese investments, and ODA, and the entire Southeast Asia got huge amounts of reparations and investments afterwards, starting from the 70s onwards. They benefited. And China more recently, you gave more than 36 billion aid. And initial aid, infrastructure development was thanks to Japanese aid. And huge investments. Japan is the number 2 investor, and they've invested more than 90 billion in China. So that has contributed enormously for China's rise as a manufacturing nation. That's what as an Indian, we Indians look at the positive elements of Japan. That's why we want closer relations with Japan. We want more investments, more trade, and there are strategic issues certainly, but that's not the only. That's only one of the factors. We really want to look at larger picture of India-Japan relationship, how it would really mold, not just bilaterally, but how it will really impact on the rest of the region, rest of East Asia. We have very strong stakes like you have. So some of those issues I'll elaborate during my lecture about the advantage between Koreans and Japanese investments is that when India opened up, Koreans were the first to come to India. We had Korean cars and Korean electronics and all that. So that's the advantage of to capture the market. That's not the case anymore now. If you really look at Sony especially in the consumer goods market, white good markets, India is one of the few countries where they make profits in. Despite the slow entry and all that. You see exclusive showrooms of Sony in all across the major cities. So which is a new phenomenon, last 2-3 years. The entire strategy has changed. That you see Japanese products. Suzuki was the only one which used to be found all over 10, 12 years back. Today the roads are dominated by Toyota, Nissan, you name it, all the Japanese cars, all the major Japanese cars. That is the reality. 80% of the cars are sold by 50% by one company called Suzuki. Another 30% by Toyota, Nissan, and few other Japanese. Honda is coming up in a very, very big way. So that's the change. So they realize that there is huge potential in India. That they should. It's a market, supply demand. Wherever there's market, companies go there. So that's it. In the 90s, Japanese companies thought there was not much market in India, not much money to be made, so they didn't go. Now they're coming because they think there's a market that's expanding. India's the growth story. We have our own constraints and problems and whatnot. But the fact of the matter is that it's a big country. So big is always better. Small may be beautiful, but big is in the big matters a lot. In the modern sense. 1.2 billion people. The purchasing power of all the people may not be great. But even if you take minuscule 10, 15, 20%, you're talking about 200 million, 250 million people. And this is expanding market. Even 10 years back, India's car market, just give you an example, it was hardly 400,000 cars. That's what an average cars were sold in India per year. Today is nearly 2.5 million. Okay. At that rate, I can imagine the same. It's almost replica of what's happening in China. China 15 years back, nobody really took China's story so seriously. So that's in a way is repeating in India as well. Thank you.
Maybe just to add to that, I think Honda has become the third largest car manufacturer in India, because after Maruti and which one is second, and then Honda is the third one. So that's why, and it is before that last year it was on 6th position. So it's coming up very fast. Even Nissan and others they have started investing and other things.
Thank you. I see time is already up, so I'll be very short. The sense of competitiveness of Korean and Japanese products across Asia is a normal conversation. In all emerging economies, there's a fundamental distinction between brand consciousness and price consciousness. There is only a minuscule segment of society which is upper middle class and elite, which is brand conscious. Japanese products stand to gain advantage when they are dealing with brand conscious consumers. Koreans have an advantage and Chinese have much greater advantage when it comes to larger segment of the market, which is price conscious market. So I think each country has a sufficient space to act upon. They have to just be sure of the niche in the market where they have to operate. And as my colleague just said, there's enough big market for everybody. And these are markets which are booming and emerging new. So there is tremendous demand for manufactured commodities in these societies. So definitely there is tremendous space for Japanese, but also tremendous space for Korean products in India and in other Asian countries. Thank you.
Could you finalize? Final comment, final response. You join.
Well, what I was trying to ask is related to Mr. Kumar's question and Professor Muranoshi's question, who have already responded 80% of my question. But I'm sorry, I'm not very diplomatic, but what I'm wondering is that your state head is not quite visible in the global political scenario. Think about Russian state head, Chinese, they don't speak English, yet they're visible. Indians so eloquent, and of course you speak very, intelligent English. Why is your Prime Minister Mohammed Singh is so quiet in the global political scenario? Is he too much busy taking care of domestic issues? Sorry for my very candid question.
No, sir, it's perfectly fine. I think it's like for a leader to be visible in the world forum, you need two things. First of all, your own personality, that whether you are a very reserved person or who speaks or who can speak on like a normal person. Manmohan Singh, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh by nature is very, very reserved person who hardly speaks. Even in his own personal capacity, he would not speak. So that's a personal thing, but whatever part, even if we take, suppose Manmohan Singh is not there or before him, why people are not visible? Maybe because of the systemic issues. Systemic issues is more problematic. Individual issues may not matter to that extent because mostly the negotiations are being dealt by the bureaucrats. And systemic issues, they cannot take any decisions because so many conflicts between the ministries, their own issues, most of the people are incapable of taking decision in that case, that the people who are indecisive in that case because they don't know whether whatever they will take decision, whether it will be endorsed by their political or whatever their seniors. So they are more indecisive because most of the time India is indecisive in that sense that they have not done their homework properly before going to any fora. And because of these issues, I think it's Indians leaders are not very visible, though they individually may be very eloquent or whatever, very good, but as a systemic issue, systemic constraints does not lead them to be visible on the world stage.
Go.
Okay, thank you. And we will continue this debate in the afternoon sessions. And two presentations. After two presentations, afternoon, so we will have another discussion. So thank you very much. And the announcement is we will have the 1 hour break, lunch break, and please come back around 1:10 here to continue the lecture and discussions. And today is a Sunday, and several stores are closed. But when you go to the basement, first floor, you will see one restaurant or one convenience store available. And when you go across the street, there's a department store and a lot of the shops there. So please be quick and come back in 1 hour here, okay?